Hey, what's up guys? In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to calculate your weight and balance. But first, fist butter. So before we get into our weight and balance calculations, you're going to need three things. The first thing you're going to need is your weight and balance sheet. Now, the thing to note about this weight and balance sheet is that all of this information, which we're going to cover really soon, is the same no matter what flight school you go to. It might have a slightly different format, but all the information here is going to be the same. So this video is pretty much universal for any flight school in the US. Now, the next thing you're going to need is going to be your POH, or your Pilot's Operating Handbook. It looks a little something like this. Now, what a POH is, if you're new to this little guy, or I should say big guy because it's pretty thick, is that it essentially gives you all of the information pertaining to the make and model of your aircraft. Think of the POH as your aircraft's personality profile. So it gives you all the inner workings and the outer workings, its behavior. But yeah. So this is what this is for. Now, a little tip, a little word of advice to you is, what I find students doing from time to time is they don't notice the variation in the aircraft. So if we're flying a Cessna 172 and there's an S after it, S is in Sierra, then we're going to need to look for our POH at our flight school that has a Sierra next to it, a 172 Sierra model. Now, of course, if it doesn't have a variant, if it doesn't have a letter after it, you're just going to look for the general 172. Make sure the aircraft make and model that you're assigned matches the POH you're going to be working with, because there are different variants for Cessna 172s, for example. I find gets looked over more often than you would think. Which is fine, right? Because we're learning. It's something that we can just note and move on from, right? So now I'm sure you're wondering, okay, well, Cassandra, we have the aircraft profile, like its characteristics, we have our weight and balance blank form, but I'm assigned a specific aircraft. So shouldn't I have specific numbers accounting for that aircraft, right? Because it has its own weight, it has its own CG, like kind of where it's balanced, and it has its own inch pounds. Now, you don't need to worry about what all of this means. For the sake of this video, I'm just gonna keep it nice and simple, just show you how to do these calculations. And then of course, if you have questions about anything that we cover, just let me know and I'll answer it for sure. But I digress. So yes, you're going to need a third thing. Like I had mentioned, the third final thing is going to be your specs, the specs for your specific aircraft. So as I had just mentioned, each aircraft has a specific weight, each aircraft has a specific balancing point, its own CG, its arm, right? And it has its own moment, which is its own inch pounds. So it's the weight and the moment together. So each flight school is different. The flight school I had originally trained at has an Excel sheet that was printed out, and they just put it somewhere in the flight school for us to take a photo of and reference whenever we did our weight and balance. The flight school that I work for now, however, has its specs online. So if I'm assigned an aircraft, what I do is I just sign in, I go through my fleet, I click on the tail number of the aircraft, I go to the specs tab, and there's my information, right? It's just that easy. So what I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to be using all three things here. I'm going to be using, like I said, this blank weight and balance form. I'm going to be using this POH, the specific POH, and I'm going to be taking you through my Flight Academy's webpage. So we're going to scroll through the fleet. I'm going to show you where I go to find the specs, and we're going to get started. Now, for those of you who don't know me, hi, my name's Cassandra. I'm a certified flight instructor. Before that, I briefly worked on the line for Delta Airlines as a flight attendant. So all of my videos are pertaining to the world of aviation. Whether you're interested in becoming a pilot, a flight attendant, or you're just interested in the aviation industry in general, this channel is for you. Welcome, and I'm really glad that you're here. So let's get into it. All right, so here's my weight and balance sheet. Now, the thing about these flight schools that we work with is when you do your weight and balance calculations, all the information we cover here today is going to be the same. We're not going to cover limits, we're not going to cover current conditions, we're not going to cover performance data or maintenance data or even aircraft V speeds. We're just going to focus on the weight and balance table here. And again, all that information is going to be the same. So the first thing I do is I'm going to go into my Academy's website and go through our fleet. So let's say I've been assigned an aircraft and it's a Cessna 172 Sierra. I've been assigned the tail number 24756. So I go to that aircraft, click on it, click aircraft profile, and I'm going to go to the specs tab. It has all this cool stuff, but what we're going to be focusing on today is going to be the weight and the empty weight that you see there. We have 1705 to start off with. So we're going to put that in the weight column next to basic empty weight. Next, we have 43.1 for our basic empty weight arm. And finally, the moment, you see, 72,419.6 is going to be our basic empty weight moment. Cool. So now that all of that is taken care of, I'm just going to plop my POH down. Make sure it matches our make and model, make sure that it's a Sierra model. And I'm just going to rifle through my POH here. And this is a newer POH that I'm rifling through. So if you have a newer POH like this, it's going to have a similar format, regardless if it's a 72 Sierra, Romeo, if it's a 52, anything like that. If it has this similar format, this is where you're going to go looking. So where I'm going looking is section 6, which is our weight and balance chapter section. And I turn to this loading arrangements page. And you see these numbers here. Here's 37, that's our arm for a pilot and passenger. 73 is for the rear passenger, kind of the back seat. And then 95 is baggage area alpha as an A or 1. 123 for B as in Bravo or 2. And so let's say I'm 150 pounds and I have a co-pilot who is 170. So together we make 320 pounds together. We're going to be located 37 inches aft of our datum. Don't worry about what datum means, it's just a reference line, and we counted 37 inches back from that reference line to determine where we are positioned. So now we just multiply across for the front seat row. So we just did 320 times 37 to get 11,840. That's all we did. So now let's say that I have a bag that's 15 pounds, but I'm not going to put anything in baggage area 1 or 2. In our POH, we had it as A as an alpha and B as in Bravo, but you get the gist, right? So my arm for the rear seats it's 73, right? So I'm going to multiply across again, 15 times 73, and we get 1,095. Now, just for the sake of humoring anybody who wants to know, if we had something in baggage area 1, we would multiply that poundage by 95. Baggage area 2, we'd multiply that poundage by 123 across, and we would do the same as we've done before. But for today, we're not going to do that. So everything's just going to follow the same format, right? Just multiply across to get the moment. Now what I'm doing here is I put these plus signs because we're going to total all of what we have so far together. So in this weight column, 1705 plus 320 plus 15. So I'm just going down that weight column and adding it all together, and I get 2,040. Then I jump over to the moment column and I do the same thing. And I won't rattle off the numbers so I don't, get behind in the video. But we come up with a total of 86,354.6. So now we have the moment, we have the weight. So how do we get the arm? We're going to divide the moment by the weight. So you divide that big number, which the moment always is, and we're going to get 42.33 or 33. And that's all you do. So you divide the moment by the weight, and that's how you get your arm. Next, we have our fuel. So we got lucky with this, and you see how our fuel capacity says 53 within those specs? You won't always get that. If you don't have it, what you're going to do is look in your POH. Typically, you're going to find it in section 1, kind of in the general section. So it's called general. Not just a general section, but the section called general. And then you'll find fuel capacity as kind of like a subcategory, and it'll give you the total capacity and then the usable fuel. You want to look for the usable fuel. I know it doesn't say that on here on this page, but when they give you the fuel capacity here, that's going to be your usable fuel. And further along in this video, you're going to see why we need to use the usable fuel, because we're going to be accounting for the fuel that we're going to burn on the ground, and we'll get to that pretty soon. But if you see what I just wrote there, 53 times 6. The reason I did that is because 53 is in gallons, but we need to convert it to pounds. So anytime you need to convert gallons to pounds, you just multiply it by 6, and that is your answer. So gallons times 6 equals number of pounds. And we got a total of 318. Now, if you see here, jumping back to my POH, this is where you'll find the fuel arm typically. And it says the fuel arm is 48. So I'm going to put that here. Now, if you notice what I'm doing, I'm underlining the word fuel because I find this really helps my students, because sometimes it's easy starting out to get lost in the weeds and say, oh, well, what's my arm here? What's my arm here? Do I have to divide this by this? What do I do? So, I say underline the fuel. Make it easy on yourself. Anytime we talk about fuel, the arm is going to be 48. And it makes sense, right? Because the fuel arm's location is 48 inches aft of our datum, and that position's never going to change. The position where our fuel tanks are located never change, but the weight does, right? We're either adding fuel or subtracting. So that's why I say 48 is where your arm is going to be, because we're always talking about where the fuel is. So now 318 times 48 is 15,264, right? We just multiplied across like before. And now I'm gonna drop down to my ramp weight row. And I'm going to add this together. So my zero fuel weight plus the fuel in pounds is 2358. I jump over to the moment and do the same thing. And now I divide the moment by the weight to get the arm, the ramp weight arm. And I come up with a total of 43.9er. And yeah, 9er is really fun to say. The more you do it, the less weird you feel about it. So I just say it. It's a good time. Okay, so now Now we go to this section 5 in our performance section. In the time, fuel, and distance to climb, this is where you'll find this in this format of the POH. It says add 1.4 gallons of fuel for engine start, taxi, and takeoff. Now this is in gallons again, right? So multiply it by 6 and you'll get your number of fuel in pounds, which is 8.4. So I'm putting 8.4 here. And I'm putting a little subtraction symbol here because we're burning fuel, right? We're taking the poundage of fuel away from the fuel tanks. We're just burning it off, right? So minus 8.4. Perfect. And I put that on the moment as well, because whatever happens in the weight, in terms of adding or subtracting, happens in the moment. We multiply 8.4 times 48 to get 403.2. And then we total it up again for the takeoff weight row. 2358 minus 8.4 is 2349.6. Jump over to the moment. We do the same thing. And we get a total of 101,215.4. And then, just like before, we divide our moment by our weight to get 43.08. Cool. All this looks good so far. Now, the last thing that requires a few extra steps is our estimated fuel burn plus 25%. Not all flight schools have the plus 25%, but we do, just for the sake of being extra cautious, we add that 25% just to be safe. So I'm going to flip back a little bit within my performance section, section 5, and I'm going to go to my cruise performance table. Now let's say I'm going to be cruising at an altitude of 3,500. Now you see where it says pressure altitude. So pressure altitude can be different from our desired cruising altitude. So make sure you get with your CFI and have them teach you the calculations, because we want to go by pressure altitude. For the sake of this video, we're going to say that our cruising altitude is pretty close to our pressure altitude today. That's why we're choosing cruising at 3,500 feet. So get with your CFI for that, and this will make a lot more sense. There's no 3,500, but we can either interpolate, which is splitting the difference, or we can overestimate. Now let's say I'm going to be flying at 3,500 and my RPMs, so in the following column, is going to be 2,500. It's a standard day in temperature, so I'm going to be burning 9.9 gallons per hour at 2,000 feet in pressure altitude. 2,500 RPMs, standard day at 4,000 is 9.5 gallons per hour I'm going to be burning. So for me, and for the sake of this video, I'm going to overestimate and call it 10 gallons per hour I'm going to be burning. And let's say our flight's just going to take 2 hours. So 10 gallons per hour times 2 hours is 20 gallons. So we're gonna write that little bit there. Now we convert it to pounds by multiplying it by 6, which is 120 pounds. Next, I multiply 0.25 to get 30 pounds. Now that 0.25 is the percentage, right? So 25% of 120 is 30 pounds. So 30 pounds is only 25% of 120. I add 30 plus 120 to get that 150. I multiply across, so 150 times 48 equals 7,200, 7,200. And now, what do? As you can imagine, we subtract 150 because we're burning fuel, right? And we get a total of 2,199.6 is our poundage for our landing weight. And our moment is 95,015.4 inch-pounds. And now, what do? Divide the moment by the weight. Yeah, you got it. And we get a total of 42.74. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So I know that there is a lot going on for these calculations at first. Just take it one at a time. I even would invite you to follow along because passively learning it's effective, but it could be even more effective if you were actively participating, right? So if you want to make this easy on yourself, I would encourage you to try and do these problems along with the video. So in the description below, I have put a link for the weight and balance form that you can print out, you can download on your iPad, whatever you like to do with it. And I supplied a link to a POH, the exact same POH that I'm referencing in this video. So that way you can follow along, you can actively participate, and it'll help you learn a lot more quickly. All right, guys, so that's the end of this video. I hope you found it useful, entertaining, informative, etc. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up so I know that you appreciate this content. If there's anything else that you want to learn or just know about in general, I'd be more than happy to make a video. Just let me know what you would like to hear. And also, if you have any questions about what we covered in today's video, leave a comment down below. Feel free to PM me on Instagram because being a CFI isn't just my job, it is my lifestyle. I do my best to help people because Lord knows we all need it from time to time, especially starting out in the aviation world. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.